Right, so a night we feared was coming. The images that have come out of Gaza, a land that has literally been set on fire as Israel finally sent ground troops in amidst the heaviest bombardment yet seen since conflict flared up again once more on October the 7th. Last night Israel cut off the power, plunging Gaza into darkness. Very difficult to film a genocide happening in the dark, after all. They also silenced those trapped within this concentration camp. For what other description is there when outside the walls are the controls to power food, fuel, water and medicines, and you cannot come and go as you wish, and you are regarded as beasts and animals instead of human by those with their hands on the levers. They silenced them by cutting off all outside communications as well, cutting off the last communications tower, and as such cutting off the internet and rendering mobile phones useless. We could have called for a ceasefire. People around the globe have demanded a ceasefire. The UN Security Council had a resolution before it to pass a ceasefire and impose it under international law, yet the US vetoed it, and we, the UK, abstained on it. None of our leaders did this in our name, though, so let's tell them as such. They've shamed all of us. They have blood on their hands, they are unfit for office, and they all need to go. Right, so overnight things escalated in the Gaza Strip as inevitably we feared they would. We knew they would push things as far as they felt they could get away with, and with Western leaders constantly gushing their support for this apartheid regime, they felt confident they could do whatever they wanted to and could do whatever they felt they wanted to. They could get away with. And so the power got cut off to Gaza, plunging them into darkness. Hospitals will have been relying on generator power, assuming they had enough fuel as things stood to keep them running in order to treat people, assuming they weren't being targeted by Israel like the Al-Ali Baptist Hospital was. I've not heard of any hospitals actually being hit last night. I have heard that there were near misses. Over the last few days, some 3,000 children have been killed. They aren't Hamas, they're kids. They're just the victims of the indiscriminate nature of the attacks by Israel, who don't really seem to be targeting Hamas, aren't really targeting Hamas. They're just hitting anything still standing. How else do you account for so many civilian casualties? They really don't seem to care who they hit. Some 1,600 people are apparently still trapped under rubble, their fates unknown. The hospitals that have survived the attacks, they aren't being described as actually treating people right now. They are actually being described as refrigerators. They become more used as body storage. This isn't my assessment either. This is the assessment of a Palestinian delegate speaking to the United Nations. All communications were cut off as well because nothing says intent to commit war crimes like gagging your victims and like blinding them and the rest of the outside world looking in. For as much as hospitals might have remained functional, there's a reason they might have become body storage more than treating people, because without communications, who can call an ambulance? Who can organise to help a search? Organise a search party and find people who might still be alive? Who, would be my question here, are the actual terrorists again in all of this? When the supposed wronged party, those the Western world hold up as the righteous, and those entitled to defend themselves, act such as this. Target such as those that they have targeted. How are they rescuing hostages like this? I mean, stories of numerous journalists being killed. One notable target, it seems, has been the monument built to American Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, who, despite wearing her press jacket, was shot dead last year. It wasn't enough that she was killed by Israel, even her funeral got desecrated. The monument erected to her memory has now been destroyed too. We've been watching for 3 weeks now as hospitals, homes, shelters, innocent civilians, 70% of whom are women and children, be targeted deliberately by the Israeli state under the guise of hunting down Hamas terrorists and claiming to be intent on rescuing hostages. Images of the destruction, of the loss of life, are everywhere online right now as social media holds Israel to account for doing what it is doing, where all other news outlets, and especially our Western political leaders, fail to, refuse to. Entire neighbourhoods reduced to rubble. In the cold light of day, we're seeing video footage of people screaming, children crying looking for lost parents, ordinary people on their hands and knees trying to dig people out of the rubble, hoping to find people alive, and too often not. But let's not forget for one moment how we got here. The UN Security Council voted overwhelmingly for a ceasefire. Permanent members, however, can veto any action by the Council, and that's exactly what the United States did, backed up in no small way by fellow permanent member, the United Kingdom, who abstained, acting of course under the instruction of their respective governments, the administrations of Joe Biden and Rishi Sunak. But they're on the wrong side of public opinion in all of this. Last night, for example, thousands of Jewish protesters protesting against the actions of Israel, protesting for Palestine, opposing the brutality being shown by the Netanyahu administration, filled New York's Grand Central Station, only for the police to come in and start arresting people, even rabbis, for daring to do so. Here in the UK, we've seen protests too, another happening at midday today in London, a national march for Palestine starting at Victoria Embankment, if you could get there today. Other demos are happening elsewhere around the country today, if you could get to one of those, calling out our politicians here and their complicity in this and their failure. Rishi Sunak, the coward, the spineless one, the weakest Prime Minister we've seen probably in my lifetime, and his predecessor was comparable to a lettuce, who said he wanted Israel to win. Well, look at what you've egged on, you utter fool. Others in the Tory party falling over themselves to bow and scrape before Israel too, in their one-sided favouring of the regime, who we, of course, supply arms to, which can't possibly have anything to do with it, can it? And then you look at the Labour Party, the party supposedly set up to stand up and stand by ordinary people, and the fact they've aligned themselves with the regime of apartheid Israel, arguably even more than the Tories are. Led by a Zionist without qualification, a man who wouldn't call for a ceasefire, who won't, apparently, unless the US leads him by the nose first, who has even advocated for Israel's right to commit war crimes, such as the cutting off of power, as we saw last night, and the fact he would never apologise for it, and has refused to ever do so. Keir Starmer has arguably given the green light to what Israel did last night through the cutting off of that power more than anyone else I can think of. And not one single Labour MP, Labour shadow minister, has resigned over any of this. All of them have put career before doing what is human. Labour councillors up and down the country have quit the party in disgust, but not higher up. What is wrong with you people? You see what you're advocating here and you're okay with this? Well, I don't want you within 1,000 miles of power here, if that's how you think. Because if this is how you think, if this is what you support by standing by Starmer, then you ain't Labour. And what will you do in this country to us? Not any of you. We need a ceasefire to save lives, and there are some within Labour and some outside of it, some associated with it, who are actually calling for that. The TUC, and Anas Sarwar, the Scottish Labour leader, Sadiq Khan, the London Mayor, Andy Burnham, the Manchester Metro Mayor, Tracy Brabin, the West Yorkshire Mayor, not to mention 89% of ordinary Labour members. If you could get to a march today, join it, be part of history, say you made a stand, that you did your part for people who have been oppressed for far, far too long, now being attacked under the guise of targeting terrorists. Send a message to those leaders backing Israel that if that is their choice, then they don't represent us, and that we won't be voting for them until they do. And if that doesn't happen, then we will take our votes elsewhere. It's the only power we have to exercise against them. It's the only thing we have to hold over them. Will you exercise it for the people of Palestine? Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. More content out daily. Do have your say on this in the comments below and be part of the conversation. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation where, as if to underline Starmer's support for Israel over Palestine, he might have banned elected Labour officials from attending pro-Palestine protests, but he let a shadow minister speak at a pro-Israel one. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.